Hey guys, what's going on? I decided to do some lessons on how to write your own indie chord progressions. These progressions are really common among indie, like rock style, but they're also been used in music all over. So here's some tricks that you can use to make your progressions sound a little more interesting than just typical chord progressions you might hear. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the minor 4 chord, which kind of sounds confusing now, but I'll explain it. So if we're in a major key, so say we're in G major, so that's the tonic, or the chord that we want to get to in the end. That's like home base. So G major is home base. So that means that the song can be in a major key, which means it will use the major scale. It can also be in a minor key, which sounds sad, like this. But say we're in G major, so we're using the G major scale. So the G major scale just sounds like this. If that doesn't make any sense to you, don't worry about that either. So, say we have a progression that sounds something like this. Those will sound really typical with rock. So the whole point of most American music is going 5-to-1. That might not make sense either, but I'll explain that. So we'll use numbers instead of note names, which will make it easier in the end. So G is 1, and then each subsequent note will be 2, 3, and so on. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 8 is back to G, so 8 is just 1. So it's just 1 through 7. So when we name chords, we name them based on the number that we're assigning them in the scale. So for example, G is 1, A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, D is 5, E is 6, and then F sharp is 7, and then G is back to 1. So scales are made up of 8 notes, that, like including the octave, 7 different notes. So in most chord progressions, you'll start on 1, and then you'll go to 5, and then 1. So 5-to-1 sounds really strong. Most people can hear it that this wants to go, this wants to go to this. So the tension from a 5 chord always wants to go back to 1 usually. And we're talking major only also. So most music does 5-to-1. So basically you can play different chords in between that. So you can play that 5 wants to go back to 1. So that's really typical, but you can use this other technique to get to 1 instead. So the goal is getting back to 1. Regardless of what you put in the middle, you can always use this to get back to it usually. And again, these aren't necessarily rules, these are just kind of guidelines. So a really cool thing you can do, how we said naming the numbers. So G is 1, A is 2, B is 3, and then 4 is C. And we're in G. So each time you're in a different key, you'll have to count up the scale which note you're talking about. So in G, C is the 4th. And usually the 4th degree of a major scale, the chord of that will be major also. So that's C major usually. But if we change it to C minor, that leads really nicely back to G. So basically this lesson will be, it's all about using minor 4 back to 1. So a common chord, like a really famous chord progression that uses this technique is Creep by Radiohead, where they do and there's your minor 4 back to 1. You can hear how it sounds kind of unique. It's really colorful because it's outside of the key. If that doesn't make sense to you right away, don't worry about that either. So when you're going back to 1, you could use 5-to-1, or you could use minor 4-to-1, along with a whole bunch of other things. So I hope you enjoyed that little lesson about minor 4. You can use it in all different keys. So if we're in B, usually it's E major, but you could do E minor, and then back to it. So the only hardest part will be to know which chord we're talking about. So if we're in A, you'll have to think to yourself, well, the fourth scale degree of A is E. Or I'm sorry, is D. So I'll have to go like A, B, C sharp, D. So that's number 4. D is number 4. It's usually major, but if we make it sad, minor, it'll go back to the A really well. So go ahead and use that in your progressions, and it should sound pretty tasty if you use it kind of sparingly, but that's just another alternative you can use instead of going 5 to 1.